right, welcome back to the Lone Bulwark. This is Stephen Wolf. Before I get into the news, I want to talk about this new venture that I'm a part of. It's called Jettison Entertainment. Jettison Entertainment. And it's a little venture that I've joined with some friends, Andrew Isker, CJ Angle, and a few others. And we're going to post all our content together. This also helps us do some marketing and sponsorship together. So if you're interested in advertising on this show or their show or any of the shows there, please go to that website. It's jettisonentertainment.com, Jettisson, and then entertainment.com. Thank you. Let's get into the news. Today I'm going to talk about some of Trump's cabinet picks. I'm going to go through the list and talk about a few of these guys and some of the issues involved. So these people have to be confirmed by the Senate. And Republicans hold the Senate. Of course, they hold the Senate at 53 out of 100, so they have a majority. And so if they had party unity, they could put these people into the position. Now, traditionally, this is usually not 100%, but usually the parties will vote and grant the president his desired cabinet picks. So even when they may not particularly like them or don't think they're going to do the job, the sort of job they want them to do, it's been the tradition of the Senate ordinarily to grant the president his desired cabinet. Now, of course, things have changed recently, and Trump's picks are kind of out of the ordinary, and they're not the kind of established people. They're not the neutral people. Typically, a lot of times, they're the names you have not heard before, and some of them you have heard. But these guys are kind of out of the ordinary. Now, I actually like most of the picks, so I'm not criticizing that move, but the Senate is often filled with people who want to kind of play it safe, and they're mainstream, and they want to look like they're just part of the normal crowd. And you have the Lindsey Graham's, Mitch McConnell's of the Senate, and so there might be some trouble for the president to get these picks approved. Now, there is the possibility of recess appointments. There's all sorts of constitutional precedent when it comes to that, but it is possible that during a Senate recess that Trump can just install the cabinet members and appoint people that he wants without the actual confirmation. The thing is, the Senate has ways to stop this. So even if no senator but one is present, the Senate, that senator can call that a legislative day and then close it. You can open the Senate and then close it, and that breaks up the recess appointments. They have to be on recess for 10 days. And so there are ways for Congress to stop this. This also includes the House can actually force the Senate not to adjourn. So there are ways that they can prevent recess appointments, but Trump is pressuring the Speaker of the House and the Senate to allow this to happen so that they could go through. Now, again, I don't think that's going to happen, but that is possible. Anyway, let's get into some of these names. The first one, of course, is Marco Rubio. He is a senator from Florida. Kind of a hawk, and there was a lot of personal tension between him and Trump in 2016 and afterwards. But I guess Rubio has been considered kind of loyal to Trump now. Now he was picked for the Secretary of State. And no doubt Marco Rubio, being a senator who's at least somewhat mainstream and friendly with all of the mainstream Republicans, he will be easily appointed to the Secretary of State, and I bet gets many votes from the Democrats as well. So he's an easy kind of shoo-in. He's kind of known as a hawk. He's very, very pro-Israel. He doesn't want a peace deal with Israel and Gaza until essentially the Hamas is destroyed. And so he's very, very friendly with Israel, and there's kind of a theme of that going through here. So yeah, that's Marco Rubio. I do think, though, that the Ukraine issue is still, I think Trump is going to try to get a deal to have that war end as quickly as possible. So I don't think Marco Rubio is going to be a hawk with regard to, regime change for Putin. I don't think he's going to want regime change for the Ayatollah in Iran, even though there's probably going to be more aggression towards Iran. At least it's going to remain the same, is my guess, as it has been under Biden. and there's going to be the continued shift toward China. So that's Marco Rubio. So I don't see like a drastic change in foreign policy going forward. I just, with the sort of people he's picked and some of the kind of moderate takes that Trump has offered in foreign policy, I just don't see much changing in that regard, except probably, again, more buildup in the Pacific, but that's already happening. And we might see more industrial buildup or in terms of capacity through Trump, just because we're lacking the ability to replace our own munitions, and also our just stockpile of munitions has depleted because we've been sending them to Ukraine. So, in that sense, the stockpile will probably build up because Trump has suggested that he will not send certain munitions to Ukraine for this very reason. But we should also, at least hopefully, see industrial capacity for military grade weapons increase. We'll see about that. Next one, this one is probably the most controversial. Matt Gaetz, the congressman, Congressman Matt Gaetz. He's Florida, I believe, isn't he? Yeah. So Florida congressman, considered. He was one of those who obstructed and sought the overthrow of McCarthy, who was the Speaker of the House for the Republican Party. Now we have Mike Johnson, and I guess he's a little bit better, but yeah. So he's very controversial, and he was appointed to be the Attorney General. Now he has a law degree. I don't think he practiced law for very long. He was under investigation for sex trafficking. For essentially, they claim that he paid women to come with him to the Caribbean, and there was all sorts of things that happened. That has not. I think there still is an investigation on him at the congressional level, but anyway, nothing has happened to him since. Certainly, he has, as the Attorney General, a lot of power to do what he wants, because under the DOJ, and the Attorney General runs the Department of Justice, is the FBI, is the DEA or Drug Enforcement Agency, the ATF, the Marshal Service, and Inspector General, and also the attorney, the U.S. Attorney Office. And so that means that in terms of the criminal enforcement, the indictments, he would have tremendous power over that. And he's an extreme Trump loyalist, and you could see that Matt Gaetz would do everything he could to clear house in all these departments, and really, in a way, demoralize those people who have deliberately sought, as a sort of deep state operation, to overthrow Trump. And so everyone is very, very scared about this appointment. Now, I've heard that several even Republican senators have said they will not vote for Matt Gaetz. And if that's the case, then I don't see how he's going to get through. At the very least, because there will be a hearing, the hearing will be very interesting, because then this will give Matt Gaetz, even if he's not appointed to the Attorney General, this will give him the opportunity to just lambast both Republicans and the Democrats, make an even bigger name for himself, because he's a very eloquent guy. He's got a sort of like Trace Gowdy he's no longer congressman, but he was pretty eloquent and went after these things on legal matters. But Matt Gaetz, he can turn a phrase. He's more Trumpian. And so that'll be, at the very least, interesting and probably instructive as we see these people go after him. And Gaetz will certainly go after them in return. So we'll see how that goes. I think no matter what, Trump probably has a second person on the list for Attorney General that would be just as effective. But I wonder if this is a move that, again, allows Gaetz to make a sort of public show of the bankruptcy of the Department of Justice and the Republican Senate for not doing anything about it. So that'll be very exciting to watch. The next one is Pete Hegseth. Pete Hegseth for the SecDef, or the Secretary of Defense. That he would oversee the Department of Defense. He was an officer in the Army National Guard. I think he was a major when he retired. He did tours in Afghanistan, got Bronze Stars, and he was on the Fox and Friends weekend. And one of the things he is likely going to do is try to get some of these generals fired. You know how many generals there are? Someone recently told me that there are more admirals in the Navy than there are actual ships in the Navy. Now, I don't know if that's true, but it wouldn't surprise me if that's true. There are a lot of generals as well walking around. And many of those generals, some of them have been, in ways, actively hostile to Trump. There have been reports that they would lie to Trump to prevent him from doing things they didn't like. And so, yeah, I think there's a good opportunity here. Remember, it was the generals were the ones who were complicit in some of the woke stuff. You got Mattis up there saying things like, he wants to learn about white rage, and to this day in the military, you are required to say "sir" to a woman in a male uniform, or "ma'am" to a man in a female uniform. And you have to do that. I mean, there are ways to kind of get around that. You call them by their rank instead of by sir, ma'am. But nevertheless, that is the policy, and you can get in trouble through the IG if you don't say it properly. So he comes in here. He's actually a member of the CREC denomination, and the CREC people are very excited about that. He does have a sort of complicated history, though, affairs and divorces and all that. And other things that are coming out too. So this is another one that will require Senate appointment. And he is very well spoken. So this is likely another Matt Gaetz type of situation where he can just attack and attack and attack the Department of Defense and the senators and make a very great public spectacle of it. And then in the end, when I don't know if, I kind of expect him not to actually be appointed unless somehow Trump can do a recess appointment. The various Republicans who attack him will be put on display on places like Twitter, and probably Elon Musk is going to boost it very strongly and show them and harm them. And after this, then we should expect to see challenges on these senators when their election comes up for nomination, challenges, and they will lose their power. And this will be used as a way for Trump's long-term legacy and influence on the Republican Party, because the hardcore Republicans in these states will not tolerate this because they are so Trumpian, and so it could seriously harm the Senate. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Gaetz and Hegseth can actually get into these departments. I mean, I hope so. So in the Department of Defense, of course, has the various armed services. It has Navy, and Navy includes the Marines and the Air Force and Army. Coast Guard is actually under the Homeland Security, so they're no longer. They used to be in the Secretary of DoD. You also have the Defense Intelligence Agency, the National Security Agency, or is that administration? I don't remember. The NSA. Is it administration or agency? Probably administration. So the NSA, DIA, and others, and of course you've got all the appointment. Generals and various policies that flow down into the armed forces. And for the next 4 years, if you have a very strong DoD, a strong SecDef, you can actually significantly shape what is happening in the Pentagon. And it's time to get serious, frankly. We know that we spent many years in the Middle East, and that was our central focus. And for the most part, that was stability operations. It was not offensive or defensive operations, apart from at the tactical level of platoons and company and battalions. But for the most part, it was stability ops. It was handing out money so you can put kids in schools, stuff like that, or it was doing like route clearance, or vehicle patrolling. They weren't doing the sort of movements at the division level. So it was mainly brigade centric, and now we have to shift to a division level warfare, which is a more traditional warfare that we did in especially World War I, II, and the Korean War, and we have to get back to the division level war. So there's a lot of changes that need to happen in the DoD. A lot of that is actually happening. Especially the infantry division commanders are well aware that they are now the focus of warfighting. And it's moving away from brigades, which was a Rumsfeld sort of creation in the early 2000s, and now it's moving back to the division level and the various assets and capabilities at the division to enable the warfighters below them at the company, battalion, and brigade levels to really do to fight effectively. So anyway, won't get too much into that, but there's a lot to do there. The next one is Kristi Noem. So Kristi Noem, she will be, and I think she'll probably be appointed just because she's the governor of South Dakota, and she's a little, I think, crazy. And actually, I believe it was her who there was something about the transgender issue. I don't remember all the details of it, but there was a transgender thing in her state, and she kind of caved on it because a bunch of corporations threatened to leave her state, and so she caved on that issue. I think it might have been like transgender in sports or something like that. So anyway, she is a disappointment in that regard. She strikes me as opportunistic, not someone who's ideologically on Trump's side, but more opportunistic on it. Of course, South Dakota is a solidly red state, so I guess she can kind of get away with being Trumpian, and also perhaps get away with kind of being a squish on these other issues. So, Homeland Security, that has like the Customs and Border Patrol, it has a Coast Guard, as ICE, or the Immigration Customs Enforcers. It has TSA and FEMA, and also a cybersecurity agency as well. So she will then oversee the immigration crackdown. Yeah, and she was the woman who talked about how she killed her hunting dog 20 years ago. I didn't follow that because I thought it was so stupid, but that's something that's going to be brought up probably ridiculously in the Senate hearing. I don't know. But yeah, she is going to oversee Trump's border security crackdown. And I hope that he does a better job than he did his first 4 years. So it was kind of a disappointment on that regard. And it clearly looks like he will. It clearly looks like the sort of people who held him back, such as his son-in-law, was named Kushner, is no longer going to be in the White House, which is a very, very good sign because that guy, now he's like a multi-millionaire because he got all the sweet deals and there's money in Israel and all sorts of things going on there. That's kind of shady. But he's no longer there. So we should see that wall actually being built and much more. All right, next one is RFK, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. This is another one that I don't know how he's going to pass. I actually am reading his book right now on Fauci, and it's incredible. Like if RFK is right about Fauci, then Fauci is like a demon. Like and it is well documented. Like he's not just spouting off opinion; he's citing things. He's giving good timelines. I mean, this idea that Fauci violated the basic principle of doctors, which is you try to care for a patient before they actually get seriously ill. So if someone has early symptoms, you try to deal with them early. Fauci basically cut off that entirely. So all like ivermectin, which is hydrochloroquine, whatever you say it, like those were actually showed promising results. They were very old, they were cheap, and that's a big factor here. And Fauci just said that they went on a media campaign, calling ivermectin a horse pill and all that, which was he knew that was false. It was used for decades to treat humans. It's good for any mammals because it's an anti-parasite drug. Anyway, I'd recommend RFK's book. It's actually fascinating. It shows how like the regime came together to make like a hero out of Fauci when he was really just a demon in the whole COVID stuff. And it's not just like the shutdown, like the what is it called? Shut in your home thing. It wasn't just that. It was the fact that he would not let doctors experiment with safe drugs or combinations of them, or he would criticize them. And then the state health boards would threaten to take away your license if you're using ivermectin and these other things, even though doctors are already showing that this works, and then he would just ridicule it. And why? Because in the end, it was all about an extremely vaccine that would come out a year later and then would be forced upon the people. Essentially, cheap drugs could have actually prevented, in RFK's estimation, 500,000 deaths. And yet the solution was to wait a year, wait till you get really sick so that you're in a hospital, put on a ventilator, give an extremely expensive medical care instead of taking pills that are $5 a bottle. And why is that? Well, because in order to get an emergency approval for a vaccine, you can't, according to U.S. law, you can't have a already present solution to a medical crisis. So you get otherwise you have to go through these kind of arduous procedures to make sure that the vaccine's safe. But if there is no solution to some kind of plague or disease or whatever, then you can get an emergency approval. So he had to then downplay the effectiveness of these inexpensive, cheap, generic drugs in order to get the approval of an emergency vaccine. But in doing that, it means that doctors had to essentially wait until someone was seriously ill and sick and had to go to the hospital before they can be treated. Anyway, I can go on. It's a fascinating book, and I think it's called The Real Anthony Fauci. I'd recommend it. Check it out. Anyway, in HHS is the CDC, the FDA, the NIH, which is Fauci's thing. That is the National Institute of Health. And so it controls a huge amount of money, a lot of policies. One of our RFK for years has been arguing that the FDA and the CDC are essentially one and the same with the pharmaceutical company, so big pharma. And if you look at the past FDA and CDC leaders, they essentially go into court. They're bouncing between government and corporation. They're bouncing back. That is the, this is like, it's not even a secret. This is just open that if you're going to progress in this field, you jump between corporation and government. It's essentially the same thing. And in this way, the FDA and CDC they essentially work with the pharmaceutical company to maximize the profits of big pharma. I mean, an example of this would be the ivermectin was that's the one they say it was a horse pill. You're taking horse steroids or something like that, which is completely false. But Pfizer, so they said ivermectin is bad, right? And then Pfizer comes out with a drug that looks almost exactly like ivermectin. But instead of selling it for $5 a bottle like it was before, because it's not generic, now it's like $1,000, $2,000 a bottle, right? So it's the same thing, and yet it costs $2,000 more, and that's because of these approval processes and also the public campaign led by people like Fauci in order to discredit a pills that have been prescribed for years, for decades, and have been proven to be safe. Anyway, can go on. That book fired me up. I just couldn't believe it. It's one of those books that over and over, I'm like, you can't be serious that they did that. But he documents it. It's really fascinating. Anyway, it'll be very. I wish RFK didn't have his voice kind of grates me, and it's unfortunate that he has that voice issue, because otherwise he could just destroy these people. And this will be another one with the Gates and the Hegseth. It'll be another one where, if people can get through his voice, it'll be very revealing as he's able to then respond in the hearing for his confirmation. All right, I'm doing this too slow. Tulsi Gabbard, another controversial. She's going to be the director of the National Intelligence, or the DNI. So the DNI is a president level position that oversees and is the direct supervisor to the various intelligence agencies among the other departments. Okay, so DNI is not like a separate department. It's like the central hub through which intelligence goes to then reach the president. Okay, so they can this person can control the priorities of intelligence and the various operations of intelligence. The downside, at least for our purposes, is that the DNI does not actually have the power to fire anyone in these departments. Now, that wouldn't matter because, again, all these departments are the heads of the departments are appointed by Trump. So at this point, that doesn't really matter. But so it's very important in terms of setting the intelligence priorities, and especially for the president. Tulsi Gabbard was investigated. And for something to do with national security, and so she kind of has an axe to grind with them. All right, so so it's the DNI is over something called the intelligence community, and that intelligence community is composed of like the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency, all the various intel agencies of the military, of the separate military departments from Army, Navy, even Coast Guard. So they're all in there, and they all report. Even though, so it's kind of a weird, like in the military, you kind of want a very easy unity of command. It's kind of awkward because in a way, these intelligence agencies are under their respective departments, but then they also report to the DNI. But anyway, that's the deal. So Tulsi Gabbard, she is no longer. Well, she's a lieutenant colonel in the Hawaii National Guard. She was a congresswoman, actually a Democrat, for 4 years. She ran against President Biden in the 2020 primaries and then left the party, and now she's a Republican. Oh, she's not. She did not officially become Republican. Oh, she is now. Sorry, I didn't read along. That she is now officially a Republican. She did 2 tours of duty in the Middle East. And of course, the Democratic establishment hates her as a traitor, and the Republicans love her for more than one reason. So CIA director, next one, John Ratcliffe. I don't know much about John Ratcliffe, but he was the head of the national intelligence in the last Trump administration, and he was a congressman from Texas. Trump said that he's a warrior for truth and honesty with the American public. He also served for Trump in his impeachment team, defending him in the first effort, the first impeachment. He aided that. So I don't know much about him. Sorry, John Ratcliffe. He, at the very least, he is a Trump loyalist. So that gives an idea of for the CIA, and hopefully what that means is the CIA. They're supposed to be focused on foreign intelligence. The FBI is the one that's supposed to investigate domestic crime. But hopefully what this means is the CIA will not be trying to harm American citizens. So all right, the next one is, let's see, this is EPA. Another guy I don't actually know, but he apparently is a very Trump loyalist. He was a lawyer. Yeah, I think, I don't know if he's a lawyer, but his name is Lee Zeldin. Lee Zeldin is going to run the EPA. He's a New York congressman. And Trump has brought him on in order to basically roll back the EPA environmental regulations. And my guess also is to try to gut that department. So to the fewer people you have in there, I guess the fewer roadblocks are going to be in place for businesses and oil and all that sort of things to operate. The issue, though, one of these issues is that there still is the law, right? So if there is a law regarding the environment, and you need some kind of approval to get your project off the ground, the question is, if you have fewer people in that department, does that actually help the business, or does that hurt the business? Because in a way, if you have fewer people, you can't complete the inspections and what's ever required to get the approval for constructing or building something. So that could actually delay. So I think you have to be careful with bureaucracy. If you're going to downsize, you have to make sure that downsizing doesn't render you actually a harm. Like you actually don't achieve the end you're seeking in downsizing. So I think that'll be what Lee Zeldin will have to do. All right, the next one is Elise Stefanik. She's a Jeepa House. She's famous for asking the questions for like Yale and the Columbia presidents about anti-Semitism, and made a big show of that. And that led to them being removed from their position as president of the schools of those universities. So that's how she became famous. She is a staunch ally of Israel. So this is another example. She'll be the United Nations ambassador. So she's a staunch ally of Israel, which is kind of a theme here. And of course, made a name for herself, very courageously defending. This is another example of are we going to continue? I don't know if things are going to change with Israel. I don't know. I think Ukraine is going to be forgotten, but you like these people will not forget Israel. So I don't know. I don't think that the policies are actually going to change. They actually might be even lighter because Biden has pushed back against Israel in very half-hearted, ineffective ways. Biden has made, at the very least, a show of opposition to some of the Israeli practices in the war, mainly because people in his party, many of them are very vocal and don't like Israel. But on the Republican side, it's probably a lot fewer actually are openly hostile to Israel. I mean, there are certainly people on our side who are like that, but I think broadly speaking, the Republican base will trip over themselves to praise Israel. So we'll see how that. But anyway, she's going to be the UN ambassador, and then of course Mike Huckabee is going to be the ambassador to Israel. Of course, he's very pro-Israel. He probably thinks they're like the people of God and all that, and it's like our duty to protect them. And if we protect the state of Israel, we're actually protecting God's people. So that's probably what Mike Huckabee thinks. Hopefully, yeah, I don't know. Again, I just don't know what is going to happen with these people. My big fear is that, like, at least Biden, like I said, put up some opposition. My fear is all that just goes away, and it's just going to be destroy Gaza, destroy Lebanon, and then with Elise Stefanik in the UN attacking the people who are attacking Israel for the destruction in Gaza and Lebanon. I don't know. It might actually get worse, to be honest, and that's one of the things I'm concerned about. All right, Susie Wiles. Susie Wiles, you probably haven't heard much about her, but she's been behind the scenes helping Trump for a long, long, long time. And this includes in his presidential victories. He actually thanked her explicitly. She's going to be the chief of staff, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that. She's going to be the chief of staff for the president. A very powerful position to dictate to the staff, reports to him concerning the staff, sets priorities, and all that. So she's worked behind the scenes. I guess that she's a great worker bee behind the scenes and leader. So that's good for her, I guess. And then she'll be in that. And then you got Deputy Chief of Staff, of course, is the infamous Stephen Miller. He was one of his closest advisors in Trump's first term, and now he's going to lead up the immigration crackdown in the second term. So he's going to be the Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy, basically working with the next guy, Tom Homan, as the border czar. Now, this guy is amazing. You've probably seen this guy in the news with his very quick and direct statements concerning immigration. Tom Homan, he's the border czar, cracking down immigration, overseeing the southern border, northern border, all maritime and aviation security. He said that he's going to conduct workplace raids to address labor and sex trafficking and prioritize, quote, public safety threats and national security threats for deportation as border czar. He's a proponent of the zero tolerance policy and also the separation, the whole family separation thing during the first Trump administration. And he said famously that families can be deported together. So if all of this is accurate, then the border situation should radically change. The question is, we all hope on the right that Trump just doesn't pay attention to the national media, all the screams and shrieking over doing this and that, and he just does it. Where everyone's really hoping on the right that he just does it. But we're kind of concerned because we're also expecting not a Marco Rubio to be Secretary of State, and some of these others. We just were not exactly expecting that. So, but anyway, one would hope that they will just get it done and do it, and put earmuffs on or ear protection. If you hear the women shrieking. Next one, let's see. I got a lot more, man. You guys don't know who these are. Mike Waltz, European company. Let's just jump. The Department of Government Efficiency is going to be Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. And so they're going to kind of be outside of the government. I don't know if they're going to get paid or what official capacity they have. Nevertheless, they are going to provide guidance and advice on how to essentially clear out as much as possible the bureaucracy and get it more efficient. So this is like Elon Musk when he took over Twitter, fired like 90% or a huge number of the people in Twitter, and actually Twitter operates better than it did before. So people are hoping then that he can do precisely this. Now, what you see throughout all of this is that among the left-wing people kind of in the deep state or the administrative state, the fourth branch of government, they it's demoralizing. And I bet that a lot of them right now are looking at corporate jobs and to switch over into the corporations. And that would be good. That means that they have open seats. And I think that Republicans, or the Trumpian Republicans, have learned their lesson from the past, and they've realized that you don't look at the degrees, you don't look at these other metrics that you think determine that he would be a good bureaucrat. The first thing you look at is loyalty. That's what matters first. The competence part is important, but a lot of this stuff can be learned on the job. What's important, first of all, is loyalty. And Trump learned that, but also other people learned that since his first term. And there have been a lot of movements and groups that have sought to create and to train people into taking these jobs. So loyalty is first, but of course competent matters as well, because you have to know the institution, you have to know how government works. And so they've got the loyalty principle down. And I think that there's an army of people who are competent and can take over these roles effectively. So one hopes, and I think for good reason we can expect it. So those are his appointments. I'm sure there's more that have come out. Foreign policy seems to remain kind of the same from what I could tell, maybe even worse with regard to Israel, at least in my opinion. Probably better when it comes to Ukraine, probably better when it comes to industrial military capacity, probably better with regard to shifting to China. But I don't see a significant change coming. I hope I'm wrong, but that's that fact. Domestically, again, I'm hoping that people have the strength and resolve and courage to do what needs to get done. So use the power of the executive branch and use the power of these agencies and these departments with control of the department heads to, one, clean out a lot of the bad people in there, and two, do their job with regard to basic functions of government, including securing the border, processing illegals, deporting illegals, and other things. I also hope too, this is the thing, our foreign policy, like, you can't separate domestic and foreign policy. The more oil that we produce here, which we are, I think we are self-sufficient with regard to natural gas. I'm not sure about actually crude oil, but if the more that we drill, and we can drill without damaging the environment, it's absolutely the case. It's ridiculous to say otherwise. Then we can become more energy independent with regard to the rest of the world. And then this certain foreign policy issues are then less relevant. I mean, they become increasingly less relevant when we can actually be self-sufficient with regard to energy. The reason why Europe is in trouble, and we'll talk about this in a minute. This is going way too long, by the way. The reason why Europe is in trouble is that they're not energy efficient. They've actually created their own energy crisis, which forces them to be dependent upon places like Russia for their natural gas. Even to this day, Russian natural gas flows into Germany. Their environmental regulations are crippling are destroying their economies. England have a bad economy. Germany has a bad economy. And that's largely because their energy prices are like 4 or 5 times or more higher than ours. So if you're going to start a manufacturing plant or a factory in Germany, you're going to be paying 4, 5, 6 times more in energy costs, plus all the labor laws, all the other things. And places like Germany, they're export dependent. They produce these higher end goods and then they export them. But if they can't produce them or they're becoming too expensive, then, well, you're in trouble. If Trump puts on tariffs against Europe, a very export-driven economy, well, guess what? That's also going to harm them. Well, I was going to talk a little bit about Germany and China, and I said that I was going to do that earlier, but this just already went too long. I want to keep these below 30 minutes, and we're nearly at 40 minutes. So just wait till next time. I will talk about these. I think they're very interesting. And but in the meantime, thank you for listening.